Hello, and welcome to this brand new episode of the SilmFilm Project. I am your co-host, Dave Kale, broadcasting live from the Metro Gold Line in not so sunny Los Angeles. And before I pass through an area with no service and drop off this call, let me quickly introduce my other co-hosts, Corey Olson, the Tolkien Professor, and Trish Lambert, the Tolkien Maven. And I believe our topic today is dwarves. Yay!
That's right, dwarves. That's right. We are meeting the dwarves today. Thank you, Dave. Dave attending with us today under difficult circumstances, live from a train there. So,
in motion.
That's right.
Look at that dedication.
Absolutely.
Fire.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Great. Glad you could join us today. So, the first thing I wanted to announce quickly before we begin, because I wanted to make sure that I don't forget. We have a bit of a scheduling issue. I think neither Trish nor I are going to be available 2 weeks from today, which would be the 17th, which would be our next regularly scheduled session. And we can't push it.
That means it's going to be all Dave, only Dave.
Well, yeah, we could do that. Well, I was thinking, so normally we'd push it back to the following week and do a 3-week gap instead of a 2-week gap, but that is Black Friday. That's the day after Thanksgiving, so that's not going to work too well either. So I think what we're going to need to do is actually push it forward a week. So that is to have our next session episode, plan to talk about episode 5 in 1 week from today, on the 10th.
Assuming that hopefully Dave can make that, because I'll still be flying.
Yeah.
I'll be in the air.
Yeah, I know you're not going to be able to make either one of those. So,
right.
But anyway, so I just wanted to note that. I think that's what's gonna. It's either that or just take, skip an entire session and not meet again until December. But that seems sad. So we will. We'll plan to meet next week instead. All right. So we'll plan on next week, the 10th, and then the following one will be the 1st of December after that. So we'll have our sort of Thanksgiving break after that. Good. All right. Well, let's jump into today's episode quickly, because we have a lot of groundwork to do talking about dwarves. We're introducing a whole new, remember all the work that we did at the beginning of season 2 when we were talking about how do we depict the elves and the different kindreds of the elves and everything, and how do we differentiate them, and then we were talking about this, a similar thing even with the Valar, of course, at the beginning of season 1. Well, now we have a similar thing. It's, well, I was going to say smaller scale, but that might seem like a short joke at the expense of the dwarves. But anyway, it's not quite as big a deal as deciding about the distinction among the different kindreds of the elves, but it's still a major thing, right? We're talking about the dwarves and the and we need to introduce the dwarves of Belegost and of Nogrod. So, let's move right towards that. But actually, what I want, here's my fear. My fear is that we'll get so involved in talking about dwarves that we will forget to go over the sort of other plot elements of the episode. So I want to start with a few of those other things that we can kind of get out of the way. Well, not that we're just trying to get them out of the way, but so that we can talk about them first and then allow ourselves to indulge in a dwarf discussion for a while after that. So here are the non-dwarf items from this episode, from episode 4. First, the Eol story. So we had talked about pushing back the Eol conflict. We discussed the possibility of the Eol conflict in the last episode, and we decided to push it back to this episode because Eol's relationship with the dwarves is really important, so we wanted to involve Eol. So let's talk about Eol for a second. Then we'll talk about Sauron, what's going on. See the bad guys interlude, which we had planned to be meeting with Shelob, which will be fun. So let's talk about those two things. And we do have the reminder that Meme and the Petty Dwarves and all that stuff is going to be in the next episode, because the next episode is the Building of Menegroth episode. So a good reminder that that's not going to be involved here in this episode. So let's talk about Eol. So, okay, the main issue with Eol, the primary textual... There are two things from the story of Eol, as told in the Silmarillion, that we need to deal with or set up. The first is his acquisition of Nan Elmoth. So Nan Elmoth is that little section of, just to actually go back here for a second, because since we have the map here, this is Nan Elmoth right here, this little separate forest over here. And you may remember that Nan Elmoth is where Thingol met Melian, so it's of some significance, but it's also outside of Doriath proper, right? So once Thingol and Melian kind of consolidate there in Doriath, Nan Elmoth is sort of on the fringes. So Eol wants it. Now we're told in the Silmarillion that he is forced. Eol has to pay. And what the fee is one of the swords. So you may remember that Anglachel, the sword which Beleg takes to his eventual chagrin, and which of course Turin uses and makes famous, the sword with which Turin has his last conversation before his death. That is one of the two swords that Eol made, so the one Eol keeps until Maegwyn steals it from him, and Maegwyn is using that sword. So we'll have Maegwyn with the black sword, which is the mate of Anglachel, and he's going to be using that in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, and he's going to be fighting Tuor with that on the walls of Gondolin and all that kind of thing. But the other one is Anglachel. So Eol makes the sword and he gives it to Thingol as a fee for the privilege of living in Nan Elmoth. So that's the story that we know happened now. So that's the story that we want to kind of flesh out. How does that go down, right? How does because there's going to be some conflict because it's Eol, right? And he's the dark elf and a bit of a problem. So, what is his relationship with Thingol going to be? We know he's rather independent. He is very famous for his very outspoken opinions about the Noldor, right? So what exactly is his relationship with Thingol? How does that go? We know that we're told that he grudged the fee that he had to pay to Thingol. So we know that his relationship with Thingol isn't entirely friendly, right? So anyway, so the making of the sword, the paying of that in fee to Thingol for his right to live in Nan Elmoth. We know that that's one thing. The second thing is his friendship with the dwarves. And this, of course, is what makes... this is about the right time frame, anyway, for him to be setting himself up in Nan Elmoth. And, of course, his relationship with the dwarves makes it especially sort of appropriate, or it's particularly suggestive, right, to bring him into this episode, because he is, of all of the elves of Beleriand, he is the one who is most closely united in friendship and partnership with the dwarves. Often travels to the dwarf cities, to Nogrod and Belegost, and studies with the smiths there. So, yeah, now... Mariel asks a really great question. Did we decide where Eol learned swordcraft? Or do we want to leave that mysterious? Yeah, well, exactly, right? This actually leads me to a more general question. What do we want to do with swordcraft among the elves of Beleriand in general? Because remember, it's kind of a big deal when the Noldor begin to make swords in, when they begin to make swords and armor in Valinor, and nobody else is doing that. Remember, this is one of the issues with the kinslaying, that the Teleri don't have armor or they have bows, but they don't have any swords. And that's the thing about a sword, right? A sword is symbolically speaking, even functionally speaking, a really significant thing, right? Because a sword is its only purpose, the only function of a sword is to kill folks. I mean, like spears and bows and like those can have other uses, right? Which don't have to do with warfare. A sword is just an instrument of war. There's really very little else practical that you can do with a sword. So it's a big deal when you start making swords, and when, especially if you're living in Valinor and you start making swords. So again, the Noldor making swords was a big deal. Why do they start making swords over here? Especially since we only just met the orcs in the last episode, right? And until the orcs come in, the elves, the Sindar aren't making war. They're not at war with anybody, right? So why would they make warlike weapons? I can't imagine that they would. Right, now they'd be hunting, so they would, Beleg would already have his bow, and I would think that Mablung would probably fight with a spear. I would kind of see at the beginning Mablung and Beleg being kind of like the, Beleg is the bow fighter. I will shoot it from a distance, and Mablung is like I will stand with the spear in the path of the boar kind of hunter, I will ride them down from horseback and like cast a spear at them from horseback kind of, that would be the thing that Mablung of the heavy hand would be about. But they wouldn't have swords. There's no way that they would have swords, and they certainly wouldn't have armor, right? Therefore, it does seem most likely, Tony, just as you were suggesting, that the dwarves would be the ones involved in this, right? That they would first get armor, especially, but even swords would first come from the dwarves. Because the dwarves, they already make war, right? They're already a warlike people. They don't need the orcs. They've been at war amongst themselves. Remember that the dwarves not infrequently make war even among their own folk. Like the dwarf on dwarf, clan wars and stuff happen. So I think that we can indicate that kind of thing is somewhere in the history of the dwarves, that there have already been skirmishes among the dwarves, that they have armed themselves. Because you can see two different motivations for it, right? On the one hand, they're smiths, and so they just really like making stuff, so they don't need much excuse to make armor and weapons, because it's the kind of thing that they love doing anyway. But they already have enough excuse to suggest the idea, but they don't. So even if they haven't used it all that much, they would just kind of run with it, right? So I think armor and swords have to be imported from the dwarves, so we therefore have two choices with Eöl. Either we have Eöl learn swordsmithing from the dwarves, or we just have him come up with it on his own, essentially. Have the fact that he's over there living by himself, making weapons of warfare for himself, that's just kind of one of the ways that shows that he's a little odd, right? That makes him a dark elf. What do you guys think about that? Do you want to? There's a chronology issue, right? Or rather, we get into some chronology issues, I think, if he has to learn swordcraft from the dwarves. We would have to make him appear to learn fairly quickly, given the time frame that we're operating under here in season 3.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to say, we do have like long stretches of time we can play with, right? But maybe not in the context of this episode. Yeah,
and we do have some stretches of time. Yeah, exactly. But it's not vast stretches. It's not like, centuries.
Right.
It's
right.
Months, maybe even a couple years, but not centuries.
The other thing is, how do we show it? Do we show it in the same show as when he's making the sword for Thingol, or is this something we should have had set up, or I don't know? Because it's like the only way I can think to do it in this episode is to do a really cheesy voiceover,
Right.
You know, he had met the dwarves.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. That would be super awkward, right? Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. We don't want to get into exposition on that kind of level.
No.
Well,
I mean, maybe it's implied in the way he interacts with the dwarves. You know, that there's obviously a relationship there. Another, we just don't go into it a whole lot. But I mean, somehow that we imply through his interactions with the dwarves is this is where he learned the smithing, or whatever we call it, metal smithing. Maybe we could do it elegantly and subtly and not get really overt.
Right.
But right. I do think you're right. I think it makes sense that it would be through the dwarves that he would have that skill.
Yes.
He would have acquired that skill.
Yeah.
Maybe we just have
is the concern that in this episode this is supposed to be sort of the first we're going to do the first interaction
yes.
of the elves and the dwarves, and so we're concerned that if we do the dwarves teaching Aol, that it has to be like a montage.
Right. That's exactly. That's precisely my fear. If he's going to be able to present Anglaghel to Thingol anytime soon, we're going to have to get a training montage for Aol, which seems frankly awkward.
If we're going to do it, can we use that song from Karate Kid, Best Ground?
We have to do the chop wood carry water scene, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If we don't want to do that, suggestion. What if there's
Oh yeah, you're being garbled a bit, I'm afraid.
This is such a bummer because I'm sure what you're saying is absolutely brilliant.
Let me just put it out. The subtle implication that Aol has already met the dwarves before anybody else did.
Yeah, that is an interesting idea. David Atlee was just suggesting that in the chat as well. I think that's a really interesting idea that that it turns out that he already has. Now, but the question is, how do we do that? Do we show here's a kind of cheesy, suspenseful way we could do it. We could start the episode showing Aol on a journey, right? And he goes to a dark place to have a secret meeting with somebody who looks sketchy, so that we lead the viewers into wondering whether he is going to betray Thingol to Sauron or to Morgoth, right? Make it look like he's going to meet with the bad guys, and then have it later turn out that it was actually the dwarves that he had met with, and it was like totally not sketchy, but it still puts a sort of a pall of doubt around Aol, right, and sort of prompts people to look at him as sort of dubious and uncertain.
And the other thing, we could have Thingol, couldn't we ask him, like, how do you know how to make swords? And Aol kind of looks at him like, I have my ways, I have hidden knowledge. Be kind of like weirdly and sinister, mysterious. Kind of, I don't know.
Well, and I would think the dwarves might refer to it. I mean, you have to imagine that the dwarves would think that he was more important than Thingol would think he was, right? Oh, yeah. The dwarves would speak of him as if he were, a great one among the elves, and Thingol would be like, what? Yeah, and Mike was just suggesting, and I think this was suggested on the boards as well, that when they come across the dwarves, they find they already speak Sindarin, or begin to speak Sindarin. They're already kind of familiar with the elves' language, which becomes a sort of a mystery in itself. How did they learn it? Hakan, it does create, if Aol has a pre-existing relationship with the dwarves that predates the dwarves meeting with Thingol and the sort of alliance with Thingol, it would seem to give Aol a really interesting bargaining position, right? So, he says, give me Nan Elmoth, and Thingol says, heck no, that place has sentimental value, I'm not giving it to you. And Aol can, sorry, all of a sudden I'm remembering Gollum being like, Gollum has friends now. We'll see if he stands for being kicked around. He has fine new friends. So like Eöl would actually try to use his friendship with the dwarves as leverage against Thingol. My problem is, how would that not work? Especially if Thingol is trying to establish good relations with the dwarves, and the dwarves already have good relations with Eöl. You've got to think, like, we got to be a little bit careful there, or it does give Eöl too much leverage, right? I mean, it makes, Eöl could pretty easily, probably, you would think, scupper the relationship between Thingol and the dwarves if he chose to. So, do you see what I mean? I'm worried that this ploy actually is going to work. Yeah. Now Zach asks a really good question. Do we have Eöl make the introductions? Like, so how do we find out? So Eöl meets the dwarves. Then the dwarves encounter, then Thingol's people encounter the dwarves and want to meet them and get to know them better. So then they would go and they find out, because the dwarves speak Cinder, and I like that idea, that the dwarves have already met Eöl. Right, so they go to Eöl, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I know the dwarves." Would they send Eöl then as an ambassador, or with the ambassadors? Would they try to use Eöl as a go-between there?
So currently, my personal bias currently is, I kind of would rather, like, I feel like maybe Eöl wouldn't be the kind of person that would be forthcoming about this fact.
Right.
And I'd rather it be left kind of as a mystery for the elves.
Right.
To figure out, how do the dwarves already know Sindra, and who have they met? And then maybe be a slightly less of a mystery for the audience, so that they can figure out that it was Eöl, and have it be something that's left as kind of is this an innocuous fact and Eöl's just a shy guy, or is this like sinister, the fact that he won't tell them?
Right. I mean, I agree. Eöl's character would be not to be forthcoming about anything, right? So he's not going to just be hanging out with Thingol and mention it. They would have to go after him.
Yeah, and he wouldn't volunteer like, "Oh, hey, would you like me to make an introduction?" Right. I would think he would view the dwarves as sort of something he'd want to keep to himself. Yes.
Because he knows how he's profiting from that relationship, and wouldn't. Yeah, right. He wouldn't be keen on sharing.
So it may ultimately be that, like, in terms of story mechanics, it makes more sense for someone to figure out that it's him, and
right.
for them to kind of coerce him into doing it, and that would be consistent with his story arc of, like, him always being imposed on by these, at least from his point of view, always
right.
being forced to do things he doesn't want to do. But there's part of me that likes the idea of it being a secret, so that the audience looks and thinks that there's something sinister going on with him.
Right. Because, I mean, there isn't, in the sense that he's not actually conspiring against Thingol. He's not actually doing anything wicked. But yeah, I mean, I'm totally comfortable with training our audience to be, like, uneasy about Eöl, right? In fact... Yeah. That's kind of the cool thing about Eöl, isn't it? I mean, he's really creepy, but he doesn't do, like, until the very end, he doesn't really do anything wrong. He's just creepy and solitary, right? I mean, it's not like he actually betrays anybody. I mean, Myglen does really bad things. Eöl, I mean, again, at the very end, when he's trying to kill Eöl, that's bad. And obviously what he does with Erethel isn't great. But I mean, when I say he doesn't do anything bad, I mean, it's not like he allies himself with Morgoth or something like that. I mean, he's just creepy. Yeah. So I like that. I like that idea. I like the idea that he is he's being made into a sort of a dark figure without actually having to give him many evil actions necessarily.
Also, it's going to be interesting because we're going to be able to see a lot of his father in Miglin later on.
Yes.
A lot of the motivations and why he would act the way he acted will recall Eol.
Right. Exactly. So lots of implications about that he's, unreliable or unpleasant, without actually, implicating him in anything criminal or actively wicked, I think is a good way to treat him at this point.
Yeah.
But coming back to trying to clarify my problem with the giving him too much leverage thing, the problem is, how can we... He still has to give Anglachel to Thingol. That needs to happen, right? Because we have to have that in place so that can be that's set up for later when Beleg takes it during the Turin story. So I know that's several years down the road, but still, we need Anglachel in Thingol's possession. So why would, if he has the leverage of, like, I am the friend of these people you want to be your allies, Mike, I think you were mentioning that, Mike Hochstad, that Eol gets non-Elmoth and he introduces he manages facilitates the introductions, or ends up doing it. But that's the problem. Why would he still make the sword? Why would he still give one of these? Because Anglachel's a big deal. It's a major cost. It's not just any old sword. It's one of two very special swords that he made, and he doesn't want to give it up. So, yeah.
So that's why I think the simplest answer here is he doesn't volunteer the dwarves, and he doesn't facilitate or help with that.
Right. Okay.
And the reason I like that is that would make, then you could make Anglachel sort of the reveal that he must have known them all along.
Right.
Right. Like if sort of they think the dwarves are like, and then they meet the dwarves, they make an arrangement, and then shortly thereafter, there's this horse trade on Anglachel for his nice parcel of property. Then that would be sort of a like, wait, how on earth did you know this guy? Like, how did you learn to make this sword? In which case, you must have known the dwarves. Where did you learn this craft?
Right. Yeah, so he's kind of outside the whole dwarf negotiation thing, and it's the sword that gives away the connection. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And the irony then, I guess, would be, David, as you're implying, had he been more forthcoming from the beginning, he probably could have facilitated the alliance more easily and earlier, and very likely have received non-Elmoth in gift as in exchange for that, or in appreciation for that. But since he didn't and kept it to himself, he ends up having to pay this fee that he grudges. I don't know that we necessarily need to spell that out explicitly, in exposition, but creating that position makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, so so we can, I kind of like the idea of opening the episode with Eol, like Eol traveling and going and meet and smithing things and doing ominous things, but we can save the dwarves. Yeah. Hakan, right, I agree. Hakan is pointing out that after the first battle, so after the orcs come down and attack, he's going to want to hide. He's going to want to set up his own little, the sort of warped, dark version of the Girdle of Melian that he sets up in Nan Elmoth. So he wants to conceal himself. So that's when he does the exchange for Nan Elmoth. So it wouldn't even be in this episode that he would be giving up on Glockhel, which does prevent us from having to do a training montage as well. So that's fine. Okay. Okay, good. So what we would do with Eol in this episode then is establish his connection with the dwarves, but the fact that none of the rest of the elves know that. And that's it, right? We just do that, and we'd show him being secretive and creepy. And that's pretty much Eol's role here, because he's not going to be actively involved with the rest of the initial exchange with the elves. It's only going to be later that he's going to claim Nan Elmoth. So that makes sense. Okay. Let's talk about Sauron. So this is the first stage of Sauron. We had the orcs, but the orcs are just, the orcs that we encountered in the last episode. It's just a few groups of orcs just kind of, they've escaped, right? They're just kind of running amok. And they weren't even supposed to be revealed yet. So Sauron, though, is doing his strategizing, and this is where he meets Shelob, or goes to find Ungoliant. I really like the idea of Thuringwethil being involved here. This seems like exactly the kind of thing that Thuringwethil would help with. Thuringwethil would help him to locate and communicate with Shelob. I could see her, because he is going to probably... She would be the one who would do the reconnaissance, I would think. She would be the one who would actually locate Shelob. And then Sauron, she would go back and report that to Sauron. And then Sauron would actually go and meet with Shelob to recruit the assistance of the spiders. Which means we need a couple different sequences, right? We need Sauron and Thuringwethil at the beginning, right? We need Thuringwethil being sent out on the go find the spiders. And I'm thinking that the conversation between Sauron and Thuringwethil there would be like, Sauron already foresees that they may need something besides pure military strength, right? And this could give us an opportunity to enable Sauron to make some disparaging comments about what Morgoth has done with the orcs, right? Remember, he's disappointed. They have it's, the final version of the orcs is Morgoth's version, the hate and anger filled version, not what Sauron was planning for his necromantic orc project all along. So he can make some sort of slightly disparaging remarks about the orcs and how he thinks they're not going to be sufficient to get the whole job done, or at least just in case they're not. And then Thuringwethil can be, well, what about the wolves? And he's like, nah. Basically he's going to tell her, I want an ace in the hole, right? So I think that she therefore is gonna, does she suggest it? Maybe she suggests the spiders, because again, we want to emphasize Thuringwethil's intelligence and her active collaboration. She is the closest thing Sauron has to a partner, to an intellectual equal. The rest of his posse are relatively unreliable and kind of thuggish, but Thuringwethil is not. So maybe she's the one who says, well, if we want a really powerful ally, what about trying, how about the one who, almost destroyed Morgoth himself? And Sauron would really like that idea. Maybe there is just a faint glimmer of Sauron wanting to hedge his own bets, right? That is, Sauron wanting to say, if I could forge an alliance with Ungoliant, that would give me some serious leverage. Right? Again, maybe he's still feeling grumpy about how things have gone down, right, when Melkor came back. And he knows, like, Ungoliant, if he can actually work a deal of some kind with Ungoliant, it could give him protection even against, not just against Gothmog, right, but even against Melkor himself. There could be just that, again, not that he's planning revolt, but you know, he serves Melkor and serves him faithfully, but he's still a bad guy, right? And
Well, I mean, Morgoth's been captured already once,
yes,
and there was all that, palace power struggle while he was gone. So, I mean, Sauron could just, like you said, hedging his bets. It's like it could happen again, and I want to make sure I'm in better position next time if it does happen, right? I mean, not necessarily unfaithful to Morgoth, but just like, let's be realistic. Let's have some insurance.
Exactly. And then, and again, and even just a hint of that, like, because he doesn't, especially since Morgoth was different when he came back, right? Morgoth was changed. He's not the Melkor that he remembers. And that's sort of evidenced, right, in the orc thing. I mean, one way to think about it, remember what we did with Autumno and the difference between Autumno and Angband, right? How Angband is just like the Iron Fortress, but Autumno was the fabulous palace, right?
Oh yeah, that's like almost a visual representation of the change, isn't it?
Yes, and the fall, the corruption, the decline. Not just fall in the sense of turning to evil, but fall in the sense of decline from greatness, right? I mean, Melkor is lesser than he was.
Right.
As represented by the fact that he can't shift out of his tyrant's form anymore. Melkor's not able to do the, like, wise and benevolent ruler thing anymore. I mean, he's just, like, tyrant now. And Sauron, I think, would see that and be disappointed and even in a sense... even in a sense untrusting. What I was thinking about Autumno and Angband... there would be, I think, an interesting kind of analogy or correspondence. Sauron's orcs would have been servants that would have fit in Autumno, right? Morgoth's orcs, what he warps them into when he gets back, are only fit for Angband, right? And again, Sauron would see that, and I think he'd be disappointed by that.
We have to reserve a line for Sauron somewhere down the line, maybe in his Anatar phase, where he says to someone, I am as Morgoth should have been.
Right.
I mean, that's really kind of, if you think about it, I mean, we could actually fashion it that way, that what Sauron does when he takes over is he proceeds the way he thinks Morgoth should have and didn't.
Exactly. He's going to do it. He's going to learn from Morgoth's mistakes, and he's not going to let that happen. And of course, then what we show is the irony that he ends up walking down exactly the same path. As the Silmarillion says. That's like right at the last lines of the Vela Quenta.
Right.
But in after years he rose like a shadow of Morgoth and a ghost of his malice, and walked behind him on the same ruinous path down into the void. Right. But he doesn't know it. He thinks he's taking a different path, right? He thinks he's going to correct the problem, but then, of course, doesn't end up doing that. So, yes. And Tony Mead points out that this would also parallel what Gandalf says later about Saruman. Yeah, exactly, Tony. We show Saruman undergoing a similar kind of thing. I mean, that's... remember back to the music, right? What distinguishes the evil music? Unanimity, right? Unison, like a just blaring unison, horns braying on the same note, right? Evil is boring. Evil follows the same pattern. There's infinite variety among goodness. There is not infinite variety among, among the fallen, among the evil. They, in the end, they may think about things differently. They may set out to do things differently, but in the end, they walk the same path down into the void. They come from different places. It happens in different ways. But at the end of the day, the final state is very similar. So that irony we can be kind of playing on, the irony with Sauron there. I mean, I really like that. So so upon Melkor's return, this first conversation between Sauron and Thorin Gwethel can be a really great place where we can show, as Marie was saying, we showed before Sauron respecting Melkor mainly for his power, also for his vision, but for his power. And yet, Marie, what I'm thinking is the vision that Melkor had of, sort of rule by strength and the kind of vision that sort of converted Myron over to Melkor's side in season 1. That vision, Sauron would be aware of the fact that vision is already degrading, right? And that Melkor is already lesser than he was, but he still has power, right? And so Sauron still respects Morgoth for his power. So, actually, great question. Zach asks an excellent question. Have we ever discussed how, the bad guys refer to Morgoth? They're not going to call him Morgoth, of course. They would just call him. They wouldn't use his name at all, right? They would call him the Lord, the Dark Lord, the Great Lord, maybe? Great Lord? The Great One? Something like that. I would think they would just have a...
And could we translate that into... I assume it's Black Speech, right? It's Black Speech this early on. There might be a cool name for it in Black Speech that they would use.
Yeah.
The Great Lord or the Dear Leader.
Dear Leader. Benevolent ruler. The big boss, Phil says. Yeah. Well, that's how Shagrat and Gorbag would refer to him, right? Fearless leader. No, I think they would. I'm thinking something like the Great One or something like that. It would be even King. I think would be too parochial. I mean, because Morgoth is going to insist on not only just being acknowledged as a king, but worshipped like a god, right? So I think that they would refer to him in that kind, more of a religious overtone than a political term. Yeah, and no, Black Speech isn't around yet. I believe it's.
Oh, okay.
Though hang on a second. Somebody.
So would it be some form of corrupted Quenya or Sindarin or something?
No, wait, because there is a. I'm forgetting now. In the Tree of Tongues, somebody look that up. In the Lost Road, Morgoth does make a language in imitation of Elvish. I'm sure of it. There's an evil speech. Yeah, I know that there's the reference to the Black Speech being devised by Sauron at the time of the making of the rings, but there is a speech that Morgoth makes, and it's in the Hlamas. It's in, or not the Hlamas. It's in the. I'm forgetting even the name of the full thing. I should sleep more. In the it is the Hlamas. Okay, right. Okay, fine. In the Hlamas, so somebody who has time to look through this, which I don't because I'm talking, and tell me what that is. Orcian, yes, Phil. I knew there was a language. Orcian divine, and Morgoth devises it for the orcs based on Valian, right? The same so the same Valian speech. So it's not derived from Elvish. It's derived from the root language from which Elvish was derived, right? So he takes the Oromian language, the language, the Valian language that the elves learned from Orome, right? I think I'm not saying we actually call it that, Karita. Orcian does sound a little strange, but I knew that back in the early days, there was an evil speech there.
And we don't really have to call it anything. I mean, we could just show them speaking it. Kind of like what Star
Yeah.
Trek's doing today with the Klingons, and they give subtitles.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, we can easily do that. Okay. Anyway, or we're getting kind of far afield though all useful stuff. So okay. So Sauron and Thuringwethil talking together. We see Sauron's discontent and the wiliness of his plan. So he's been sent to find Ungoliant. We know that Morgoth still fears Ungoliant, so he wants to know where she is and if she's coming back, right? So he has sent Sauron to find her, and Sauron is like, okay, I'm going to take this and turn this to my advantage. First, I want to see if we can, if we. So hang on. So what if? Because he doesn't know she has offspring yet. So he's going to send Thuringwethil after. So he just thinks this is an Ungoliant issue, right? So he's like, okay, Morgoth said go find Ungoliant and Thuringwethil. Between you and me, I think that maybe we could turn this to our advantage, right? Maybe it would be good for us to establish an independent relationship with her ladyship, right? And by the way, it would be fun, right, if somebody calls Ungoliant her ladyship, right, which is what Shagrat and Gorbag call Shelob, right? That would be kind of fun. Anyway, so he sends Thuringwethil off to find her, and she would be perfect for that anyway. So she finds Ungoliant, or finds evidence of Ungoliant's disappearance into the extreme south of the world. But she comes back because she finds something cooler and closer to hand, which is the spiders. She finds Shelob and Shelob's siblings, and comes back to report to to Sauron, hey, good news, bad news, bad news. I didn't actually find Ungoliant, and she's kind of down and out of reach. So Morgoth would be, glad to hear that. But it's no good for us. But wait, right? I did find something, which is that she has had offspring, and there's like a whole bunch of spiders. And that's then when Sauron would say, okay, brilliant plan, right? Let's recruit the offspring of Ungoliant and set them up so that we can use them as the elite spider SWAT team to go in and they'll be our ace in the hole in the conflict against the elves of Beleriand. So that's how they discover it. Yeah. All right. And that's all we need to know. Oh, we want to do a meeting with Shelob, right? So that would then be a third scene. So scene number 1, go find Ungoliant, and I'm dissatisfied with Melkor. Then she comes back and reports the spiders, and he's like, that's brilliant. Let's take advantage of this. And then she takes him down, and he meets with Shelob. Or do we need that scene? Do we need a meeting with Shelob? We could just have a third scene. We could have 3 scenes. Again, their initial conversation. A second scene, which is just Thuringwethil finding Shelob, right? So all we get is a Thuringwethil Shelob scene, in which they don't even necessarily have to have dialogue. We just have Thuringwethil discover them. And then she comes back and reports, and he's like, I have a brilliant plan. So then we don't necessarily have to, we don't actually have to do a full reveal of Shelob. And no, Tony, I don't think that Shelob is going to take a hot female form as in Shadows of War. We had Ungoliant do that. I don't think we want Shelob doing that. She's a different order anyway from Ungoliant. I don't see any reason to believe that she can change her form. Yeah. Okay. So we can decide as you guys actually go through and outline this episode. You guys can decide whether you like the idea of how much of that sequence you want to include in this episode. We can shift that some of it forward if we want to, but I like having that element in here. Okay. All right. All right, good. Well, let's talk about dwarves then. Oop, went the wrong way. Okay, so let's talk about dwarves. So the dwarves of the Blue Mountains, right? There are two families of dwarves in the Blue Mountains, the one that live in Nogrod and the other that live in Belegost. Nogrod in the south, Belegost in the north. Neither one of these are Durin's folk. Durin's folk, meanwhile, have already set up at Khazad-dûm, and they don't come into these stories at all. So none of the children of Durin are going to enter into the Silmarillion story until after the War of Wrath. So we're not going to meet them until the Second Age, at all. That in volume 12 of the History of Middle-earth, Tolkien names the two families of dwarves that were in Nogrod and Belegost as the Broadbeams and the Firebeards. So what are they like? What are the Broadbeams and Firebeards like? How do we distinguish them? What are their cultures like? Because we don't want them to look just like the children of Durin. For one thing, we need to make sure that, of course, that the common speech name of the children of Durin are, of course, the Longbeards. So these dwarves should not have long beards, right? Like the characteristic dwarf, like the dwarf beard that Thorin has, right? His beard, that and the whole "may your beard grow ever longer" thing, that the dwarves are do, and the whole like I can tuck my beard into my belt thing, right? That's a long beard thing. That's so they're not going to have really long beards, right? So they can have beards, but they should be shorter beards. The Firebeards, I agree, Carita, it seems fairly obvious that the Firebeards should be largely red-headed. The Firebeards are the dwarves of Nogrost and the Broadbeams of Belegost, right? Nogrod, the Firebeards of Nogrod and the Broadbeams of Belegost. Right. Do the Firebeards all have Weasley hair then? Phil asks. They don't. It doesn't have to. They don't have to be uniform, right? We can have them all different shades of red, but bright red I think should dominate. So what else? They're all smiths, but they should have different sort of specialties, different things that they're known for. What are the things that they should be known for in particular? Well, there are a couple things we have to guide us here. One, the Silmarillion mentions that the dwarves of Belegost are the ones who devise the making of armor, like they do chainmail. Isn't it the armor of interlocking rings that they make? They're the ones who invent chainmail, I think. So they can be primarily armor smiths. I would think that people of Nogrod would be primarily jewelers, because I mean they can all make weapons, but I would think that we would want to make jewel craft be especially prominent among the dwarves of Nogrod, because remember, it's going to be the craftsmen of Nogrod who are going to be brought in by Thingol to put the Silmaril into the Nauglamir down the road. So having them do jewel craft primarily is yeah. So I mean, I think that one is one thing that makes sense.
Now, this is, and I'm sort of semi-serious with this. There's also things like home decor.
Right.
Like lamps. Like things that would probably be hanging in like Menegroth or even in Gondolin. That would be metal crafted stuff. And I mean, it sounds kind of funny to say, oh yes, they specialize in home decor. But
right, exactly.
Still,
this is the dwarf family that specializes in interior decoration. Yes.
Right.
Yes. And there's another family of dwarves that are just into sartorial fashion. It's what they do.
This is the IKEA clan. And this is
exactly.
But I mean, if you get into that kind of specialization, I was thinking, even in weapons, there could be specialization. I mean, there could be one clan that's specifically known best for swords or axes or throwing axes or
right.
I mean, it's like this is obviously the work of such and such a clan. I don't know.
Well, that's the other thing that we've got to think about is we do have some famous weapons being made. So do we have, some sort of specialization, like, the making of blades is sort of particularly character, maybe one of the clans only uses like hammers and maces in battle, and the other one uses, swords and axes and daggers. In which case, obviously, the sword, axe, and dagger one is where we need to have Telkar the Smith come from. And by the way, I speaking of the home, I don't want to leave the home decor thing. I agree. Architecture is another thing, right? The crafting of Menegroth is going to be a big deal. Do both of them do that equally? Yeah. I think we could. I think that we could. I mean, we don't want to get too cute, about having them subspecialize. But it makes sense to have there be trends, and they can all do they can all kind of do all of the things, but have there be a particular short list of things that the different families are particularly famous for.
And this kind of strikes me as backstory. Jackson did this with the movies,
right.
Where we had, it wasn't actually in the movie proper, but there was all this, and of course we're going to have mad fans. I mean, we're going to be so popular that it's going to be ridiculous. There was actually stories kind of published or put out, as aside from the movie, that informed the viewers, but it didn't come into the main story. You know what I mean? This seems to me that kind of thing,
right.
Where there would be a backstory, but in the actual episodes themselves, we wouldn't really be calling it out. We'd visually see things that would, that we would be able to identify. You know what I'm saying? So it's almost kind of like it's a necessary backstory to be able to do things like costumes and the looks of dwarves and that kind of thing, but we don't get, we don't want to get bogged down in the actual episodes themselves with this kind of stuff, although it's still needed.
Yes. Right, exactly. No, that's exactly what's kind of fun talking about this now. As you say, it's not like we're going to talk about this in the episode, but it is really good for us to kind of think this through. Hang on, though. I'm having a hard time because Maria's pointing out that, yes, like Telkar is from Nogrod. So that would mean that they'd be the Blade people. But, okay. then I couldn't do the other thing. It makes no sense at all. If like, so what I was just suggesting about have one dwarf clan primarily fight with edged weapons and the other primarily fight with blunt force trauma weapons, it doesn't make any sense that the dwarves of Belegost would be the blunt force trauma weapon folks, because they like. Blunt force trauma weapons are exactly the kinds of weapons against which chainmail does very little good. So they're not going to invent chainmail like that, which is, I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. And yes, Azakal, the Lord of Belegost, is the one who uses, we know he uses a blade because he's the one who stabs Glaurung with it. Yeah, I mean, and no, Mike, we don't want to make them homogeneous. That's not the point of making them like completely cookie cutter each family. But we do want to introduce some distinctions. You know, we want there to be, I would think we would want there to be a different character between, you know, an identifiable character. And one of the ways that we can do that is have general trends of association, right? Both visual association with things like kinds of armor and weapons, as well as you know, the specialty of craft, you know, so that again, like if you're looking for jewel smiths, oh well, you want to go to the Firebeards for that, right? That kind of thing just sort of helps. It doesn't mean that there can't be excellent jewel smiths among the other, you know, among the broadbeams of Belegost, but you know, maybe we do it the other way around. Maybe we have the primary weaponsmiths be the smiths of Belegost, but then we have Telkar be of Nogrod, you know, so but there's this unusual genius, you know, and it sort of makes his remarkableness stand out more, right? I don't know.
Well, the other thing you also referred to earlier, and I think this applies here, is the, you know, interclan warfare that would cause them to smith weapons, right? So, you know, that implies that there are some serious differences between clans, you know, both in look and in sort of viewpoint and maybe even ideology to some degree, you know, so that's another.
Well, that's it. I mean, exactly. I mean, it would be able to, it would map onto a larger cultural distinction between the two of them. And they would be, I agree with who was just saying that. They would be competitive, as Tony was just saying this. They would be competitive. They can be at peace together. We don't have to show Belegost and Nogrod going to war against each other at any point. But there's a difference between not being at war and being always friendly, right? I mean, they would be, as Tony suggests, at the very least, they'd be like contractors competing for contracts, right? I mean, and they would have a clan rivalry between each other, you know, like, you know, who really does make the better, you know, armor, or the better, you know, who
kind of like the UK football teams, right?
Something like that. Yeah. I mean, there would be a clan rivalry, at the very least. But, yeah. So, I
always think of the dwarves as the Ferengi of Middle Earth.
Well, that's the other thing to remember, is that the root of dwarves in Tolkien's mythology is that they are merchants. They were merchants before they were craftsmen, right? In the post-Hobbit, post-Lord of the Rings Tolkien world, we always associate the dwarves with craftsmanship first and foremost. Like to be a craftsman, to be a smith, is the essence of being dwarvish, even more than anything else, right? But in the initial conception, which was still in force when Tolkien wrote The Hobbit, the dwarves are primarily people with a high opinion of the value of money. Remember that line in The Hobbit. They're primarily merchants, and indeed, they were like warmongering. They seem to believe in several of the rules of acquisition, including, for instance, war is good for business, as Tolkien has them explicitly selling arms to both sides of the elf Morgoth competition, and they're making out like bandits in the siege during the siege of Angband. And I'm not saying we necessarily do that, though maybe we can have some implications that some of the dwarves, or that there can be rumors that the dwarves are also selling weapons to the orcs or something. I mean, that can be a thing that we can get in later on to bring in some ill will and distrust, further ahead in the days of more distrust. But anyway, they are merchants. Being merchants it should be a big deal. It should be a big part of who they are and what they do. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. Hang on, Mario. We're going to come back to the dwarf women question. Still thinking about Nogrod and Belagast right now. I like Marielle, or no, not Marielle, sorry. Marie was saying the Firebeards, the redheads, can be the primary jewelry makers, and the dark-haired dwarves, the Broadbeams, can be primarily the weaponsmiths. Both would do both, but that would be what they would be most famous for. I think that's fine. I think that works well. As I said, the dwarves of Nogrod are going to need to be jewelsmiths, and famous for being jewelsmiths, because they're the ones that Thingol is going to send for when it comes when it comes down. Yeah. Yes, Hakan, I would want the Firebeards and the Broadbeams to complement each other, but not too much. Remember, there's competition as well as complementing, right? They're not just, partners. They're not just, sort of the perfect, team. They're in competition with each other. So what are the? So Mike is asking. So hang on. So what are the Longbeards then known for? If we say weapons and armor, primarily Belagast, jewels and fine work, it's sort of decorative work, Nogrod. I say that the Longbeards are primarily known for architecture. Like Khazad-dûm is, going to be way grander and more impressive. Toys. Mike and Phil both suggested toys. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, excellent. The toy market of Dale was the wonder of the northern world. And of course, Mithril, Zachary, absolutely. That's going to be their trademark, later on down the road. But yeah, I would say architecture and chiefly, and then Mithril, eventually. So therefore, their weapons and armor become very famous because they can integrate Mithril into it. So, yeah, exactly, David. Architecture and metallurgy. Yeah, there you go. That's what the Longbeards are famous for. Again, not that it's going to come up explicitly. And so again, physically, the Firebeards tend to be red-headed. The Broadbeams are darker. That is darker of hair, probably darker of skin as well, perhaps slightly. How about their beards? What should their beards be like? I'm thinking the Broadbeams should be wider and stockier, not necessarily fat, but really broad. hence the name. I mean, broadbeams and firebeards sound like names that are longbeards, broadbeams, and firebeards, right? All three of those names in the common speech sound like slightly derisive and descriptive names, right? That's why I think we should follow those things, because that's we're kind of doing it backwards, right? We don't make the broad beams wide and fat because they're called broad beams. Rather, we say they were called broad beams because they're wide and fat, right? So yeah, I mean, I think that could. I'm thinking the broad beams maybe have like sort of thin and scraggly beards. They're not really, I would think like the beard spectrum, right, would be the broad beams on one end and the long beards on the other, and the fire beards kind of in the middle. Like the kind of beard that like goes down to here maybe, but not the ones that you can tuck into your belt. And then the broad beams are the more scraggly. Oh, interesting. Mike is suggesting that the broad beam could also describe their beards, that their beards kind of grow outwards like this instead of, long and down. Okay, I like that. Yeah, enormous whiskers, Hakan says. Yeah. Hakan, wouldn't it be cool if the broad beams were into like elaborate mustaches or something, right? So you have like, and I don't know if they would wax their mustaches. This, by the way, was my son Matthias's number one request when I started growing a beard. He was really disappointed that I wasn't letting my mustache grow because he wanted me to wax my mustache. I'm afraid he's going to end up disappointed about that one. But yeah, so like big, like mutton chops or like big mustaches. Maybe even like the mustaches that hang down like past the beard and stuff, like the, I think that could, that could work and be cool looking. Anyway, obviously we're going to leave these things to our visual folks, our visual artists who can, help us to really, capture this stuff. But, yeah. Tony says, so the broad beams would look like fat Victorian gentlemen. Yeah, not so polished, I would think, but something like that. Yeah, sure. I can handle that. Okay. All right. Let's talk more about the culture. So, they do, I agree, there's some points that Marie put together for us here. Despite the long distances separating dwarvish strongholds, dwarves maintain a strong us versus them mentality when dealing with non-dwarves. Yeah, so clan rivalry is all well and good, but they are going to close ranks when they're confronting elves and others. So, I think that we would, when we're negotiating with Nogrod and Belagast, we're negotiating with them as a together as a united front, in that sense. And yes, all the dwarves speak essentially the same language, right? So there's no like, Sindarin Quenya divide, in Khuzdul. Trish, what do you think about the female dwarves? What do we do with the female dwarves?
I have stayed beyond my normal time specifically for this question.
Okay.
I think we don't beard the females.
I don't think we beard the females.
I just don't think we do. I think that was an affectation of Jackson's.
Yes,
not of
it really was. I mean, there is that one brief reference to the fact that dwarf women are sometimes mistaken for dwarf men. He does not say that they have beards.
No.
I mean, they could. I don't know. I guess in some ways, especially with, maybe longbeard women can or something, but I don't think, I'm not sure that the beard should be such an important fetish for all of dwarf culture. as it has kind of grown into. That just hang on. I think Dave from the train wants to weigh in on this as well.
What if we made that a pernicious in-world elf lie?
Oh, I think that'd be awesome. That the dwarves actually promulgate. Like Gimli's saying it could. I mean, I know he did it in the movie and on the book, but it could be like this thing, the in joke that dwarves do. Is like they tell everybody that the women have beards.
Yeah.
Then I was thinking it was the elves' fault.
Oh, right. The elves' fault.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Because the elves.
So what if?
Because the elves don't have beards mostly.
Right. What if there's sort of the in-world truth is something more like hey, when they're all armored up and fighting, like you wouldn't be able to tell a man from a woman because they're all just fierce warriors and all that kind of stuff.
Now that could be the case, where female dwarves do fight,
yes.
And they armor up just like the men do. Yeah.
Right, but then like Kurafin or someone starts the beard rumor. Right.
That you can't tell any difference between, and which of course, and that misconception is enabled to continue because dwarvish women don't go because they're secretive, right? They don't go into public that much. They're not going to be merchants, but they would be warriors and smiths.
Right. And I could see the elves starting it and then the dwarves never bothering to correct anybody because, why do they want people to really know the truth?
Yeah. 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 It would be hard to. Mariel is expressing concern, like, how do we convey this on screen? Mariel is suggesting we could actually have this rumor could then be further justified by the fact that some dwarf women could actually wear false beards in public to disguise themselves because they don't want to draw attention to the fact that they're women.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I like that.
I mean, I could totally see this becoming a falsehood that dwarves would support, that they would never deny because they're so secretive. So, the rumor that the females have dwarves is something the dwarves would take advantage of, as opposed to trying to disabuse anybody of their misconception. Right.
Exactly. Because they wouldn't be insulted by it. They wouldn't really care necessarily. They wouldn't be. Yeah.
They'd probably be like, well, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It'd be awesome if the women had beards.
Right. Yeah. Now, Lincoln is suggesting, and I agree, there's definitely an argument to be made for this, to say that, it's kind of interesting if the female dwarf, if the dwarves don't conform to human, body types. And so therefore, is there any reason why they shouldn't grow beards? It would be, it could be kind of interesting in that way.
Well, then the other thing with that is maybe some male dwarfs are clean shaven. Then in that case, you know what I mean? It's like, if we're gonna break up the stereotype with the women, let's do it with the men too. In which case, maybe it's both. Some are clean shaven, some are bearded, and they're both men and women. I don't know.
Well, I do agree. Again, the obsession with beards, right, and the idea that no man would ever shave his beard. That's got to be a long beard thing, right? The long beards are the ones that really, because their identity is in their beards, right? So they're the ones who go around saying, "May your beard grow ever longer," and that kind of thing. I agree. There's no reason we couldn't have some clean-shaven fire beards or broad beams. Yeah. Phil does point out that shaving would be sensible when you're dealing with hot metal. Yes, you don't want to let your beard fall into the forge, right? Or come between, your hammer and your anvil at any point. Yeah. Sorry, somebody, made a suggestion that I loved, and I didn't get to say it at the time. Oh darn it, who was that? It was about Aule. Remember that, of course, when Aule made the dwarves, one of the reasons they look like they do is that he didn't know exactly what the children of Iluvatar were going to look like. So the fact that the women are bearded, that could also be explained thereby, like that, like he had a vague impression of facial hair, so he just like gave facial hair to all of the dwarves, and didn't realize there was going to be a gender distinction between, on the facial hair question. And so, kind of left that out. But that's a little harder to maintain, given that most of the elves don't seem to, neither men nor women among the elves seem to have beards. So, yeah. And now, Karita, I agree with you. One way or the other, Karita is saying we should either give them, beautiful beards, or let them be barefaced, but not, make an ugly joke about, gross female body hair. Basically, I agree. We don't want to just play it as a joke. And that's
I think my main concern, is I don't want it to become, like you said, such a focus, such an issue.
Yeah. I mean, maybe what we can just do is play up the secrecy of the dwarvish women, so that we never show them, except when they're armored and visored, right? So we could actually
don't know.
Yeah, we never reveal whether or not dwarvish women have beards, and we leave it to people to speculate.
Rumor among the elves is that they do, but we will never know. I like that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, so they would be either like visored or veiled or something, because they keep themselves secret. Yeah. Oh, right. Of course, and Maria's pointing out that Aule himself has a beard, so he could just be modeling all the dwarves after himself. Okay, cool. So let's see. There are a couple other points here. Marielle, absolutely. Marielle here is emphasizing about the vast trading networks, which means, Marielle, that the implication that we can have here, we can have there be a couple references. There can be some exotic commodities that come into Beleriand through the dwarves, right? To show evidence of the, because it's not, they don't just trade to the west, right? They don't just go into Beleriand. They're also going east, right? They're also going out into Eriador, trading with the dwarves of Khazad-dûm and on south. So, I mean, we could have, the dwarves coming in and bringing in, like bananas and coconuts, from the south at some point. That kind of thing. I think that we can, we would definitely need to bring in some stuff and to show that there's evidence that they are a very widespread trading culture. Silk, Marielle, that would be really interesting, because you'd think the elves would be kind of into silk, right? They would like that. So that's a really great suggestion of a kind of commodity that could be brought in by that's only obtainable from the dwarves. And yes, Mithril from Khazad-dûm, we can go there, Tony. I think I would want to go there very rarely. I think, Mike, you're on exactly the right suggestion there. Mithril from Khazad-dûm could be brought in to make the Nauglamir out of. Yes. That sounds perfect to me. And have it be the only one. Have the Nauglamir be like the only Mithril in Beleriand, essentially. And it's one of the things that makes the Nauglamir such a big deal, even before the Silmaril gets put into it. Yeah. Brianna suggesting that the Feanorians are the most silky of the lot. Can I just say I love the idea of Caranthir dressed in a lot of silk. That makes me laugh. I like that. Anyway, okay, yeah, cool. Interesting Hyrungil's suggestions here about sort of the different characters of the different clans. Firebeard's more aggressive and warlike. Remember, the Firebeards, the Dwarves of Nogrod, are going to be the ones who are going to end up in the war with Doriath eventually. So remember, we have lots of kind of foreshadowing of that at the beginning here in this first relationship. The Broadbeams, more dark, silent, into mystery or magic. Okay. More mysterious, in a sense. Yeah, I could that I could see. And right, with the long beards is more Germanic or Norse. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Great suggestions. Okay, now a couple specific characters that we need to think about setting up. Because there are some dwarves that we definitely need to meet. First is, of course, Telkar the weaponsmith. Now, here, Mary, I'll come back to the point that you were making before. There was discussion on the discussion board about making Telkar female. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I think that the dwarf women should be smiths, and I have see no good reason why Telkar couldn't be. I think that would be fun. I don't know how it would come up. Well, we'll have to think about that. But another thing we need to think about, and a couple of you mentioned this earlier on, Telkar, of course, made a few major really important things, right? Telkar is the one who forges Angrist, the knife that Beren is ultimately going to use to cut the Silmaril out of Morgoth's crown. Telkar, of course, most famously, is the one who forges Narsil. So, you know what we don't have? Any story about what Narsil does in the First Age. We can't have that, right? If Telkar forges Narsil early on, right, then what's Narsil doing? I mean, we know it's going to become a Númenórean heirloom, right? We know that Thingol's sword, Aranruth, is going to be the sword of the king is going to become the Númenórean king's sword. So it is Aranruth that Ar-Pharazôn is wearing and wielding when he attacks Valinor eventually. So fine, we know that. So that becomes the sword of the king of the Númenóreans. Narsil, forged by Telkar, is an heirloom still in the house of Elros, right, and ends up going to the, that other family, the line which leads to Elendil rather than the line that leads to Ar-Pharazôn. But yeah, so let's talk about the Age of Dwarves for a second. Now, we know that by the time we're in the Third Age, the dwarves are living about 250 years or so. Can we make them longer lived in the First Age? Do we have a reason not to? Could we make the Broadbeams and the Firebeards just be sort of longer lived than yeah. I mean, I agree, Marie, one of the ways in which dwarves contrast with elves is their mortality. But you can still live for quite a while and still be mortal, right? And still have a very short lifespan compared to elves. Now, the elves aren't going to see the dwarves dying of old age, right? They don't live with them enough to this, so that when, Beor dies of old age, it's still a shock. But yeah. Anyway, hang on. Let's answer the Narsil question quickly first. But anyway, the point is Telkar there's no way that Telkar can possibly still be around in the Second Age or something. So Telkar is early, has to forge Angrist. So Telkar is going to be here at the. I think that we can meet Telkar here. Anyway, so okay, Narsil. Narsil's a big deal, right? The fact is, Narsil is one of those backwards projections. I don't think that Elendil's sword was forged by, a dwarf of Belagost or not, a dwarf of Nogrod, until Aragorn says that. Until Aragorn says Telkar rotted in the deeps of time. I think that's the moment when Telkar became the, so there is no story about Narsil in the First Age because it didn't exist when he was writing the stories of the First Age. But it's one of those things which, in retrospect, I mean, I think it's gotta be important. So what role does it play? It's got to come in. Somehow it has to get to the Númenóreans. It has to get to Elros, but not be Elros's primary sword. That's Aranruth, right? So the immediate destiny of Narsil is to become Elros's second best sword, right? One of the two surviving swords of the First Age, which is a really big deal. So, to whom do we give it? It can't be Tuor, Zach, because Tuor has an axe. He has an awesome axe. And I'm really looking forward to the axe of Tuor, because I think the axe of Tuor is awesome. So it can't be Tuor. Who can we give a sword to? Fingon, suggests Mike. That's a really interesting suggestion. Though, see, I think it shouldn't be Isolde, right? Because Isolde would make his own sword. So it would have to be something that would come in, wouldn't it be? I mean, Finrod's sword. Okay, I could see Finrod wielding a dwarvish sword. We know that, Finrod is going to be connected to dwarves as well with the whole Felagund thing, and he's the one who has the Nauglamir, right? Yeah. Mike and Hakon both suggest Celeborn. But why wouldn't he keep it? So he'd give it up. But Hakon, it would be kind of anticlimactic, right? For Celeborn to give his sword to Elros to be his second best sword, right? You'd think it would have to be, he'd and I yield my ancient blade to be your backup sword, Elros. That seems a little bit sad. It could, Tony be, so Tony's thinking about associating it with the Ring of Bara here, to be an heirloom of the House of Beor. Yeah, I hear you. And that can work, but that can't be original. I mean, Beor is going to come in long after Telkar is dead, presumably, unless we make Telkar very long-lived indeed. So, even then, it would have to be handed down to the House of Beor from somebody else. From Finrod, I assume, is what you're suggesting there, Tony. It couldn't be Hurin's sword, Mike, because then it would be lost, right? Hurin presumably loses his sword at the Fens of Serech. Yeah, Mike, it does have to pass to humans at some point. I agree. Well, no. Yeah, but no, not necessarily. Because it can be where it has to go. I mean, if we trace it backwards, right, from Elros, it would go backwards and be. It just has to get in the bay of at the refugee camp at Balar, right? Which means it could come from Gondolin, it could come from Doriath, it could come from Nargothrond. Yeah, Finrod could give it. Well, see, Lincoln, that's my problem. Would Beren get it? Because if it's Finrod's, Beren is the only one to whom it could hand it down. Because if it's Finrod's sword, then Finrod would use it until the end, until he died. So it would have to go to Beren, whether he gifts it to him or not. Either he gifts it to Beren or Beren loots it off his corpse, one or the other. But it would have to pass from Finrod to Beren. And then Beren dies. You know, his body is in Doriath, so assuming he gets it back, it could descend them and come ultimately to the refugee camp at Balar through Elwing. Yeah, Marie, I agree. It can't come from Gondolin. That doesn't make any sense. They don't trade with dwarves, and yeah, they're too cut off there. Mary Alice wondering if the sword of Finrod might be too high profile. But still, it's got to be old. I mean, even Finrod. How is even Finrod going to get it? I mean, I guess it could be a sword that Telkar made that could be given to Finrod as a gift from the dwarves after Telkar's death. She doesn't have to still be around. Finrod to Beren to Dior to Elwing. Mike, that could work. It could work. I mean, I kind of... Don't get me wrong, I like the idea of it being Beren's sword, becoming Beren's sword. Except, here's my one hesitation. My one hesitation is... No, remember, Mariel Thingol has his sword. Aron Ruth is his sword, and that's the sword that becomes Elros's number one sword. Now, Phil asks a good question. Phil says, does it have to be famous from the start? Could it just become famous because it survives? So in the first age, it's a perfectly average sword, but a perfectly average sword from the first age becomes becomes an awesome thing after the fact. Yeah, but I don't like, for dramatic purposes, I think it would be coolest if this is an heirloom, we want to see this getting passed down, right? It's one of the cool things about doing the whole longitudinal SilmFilm project, right? Is that by the time we get to the Lord of the Rings story, think of the weight of history just within the context of the SilmFilm show itself, right? The Ring of Barahir, right? When Aragorn shows up with the Ring of Barahir on his hand in The Lord of the Rings, the people around him in the story, the other characters in the story, most of them aren't going to get the significance of that, but the viewers will, right? The viewers are going to remember. They're going to remember the day that Finrod gave that to Barahir, right? They're going to remember Beren taking it, from the orcs who slew his father. They're going to remember, Finrod and Beren, in the dungeons of the Necromancer. That's going to be really cool. So similarly, I think that Narsil, we need to be able to see, so that when Aragorn is reforging Narsil, when Elendil is using it and it's broken and then Aragorn reforges it again, we have this continuous history of it. Marie, I agree. I'm kind of joking when I'm calling it Elros's second best sword. I'm not saying that I think that he should wield it. It's just, I'm calling it that because it is passed down. It comes to the house of Elros, but it is not the sword of Elros. The sword of Elros is Aranruth. So we could just ditch that. On the one hand, we could ditch Aranruth. No, we can't ditch Aranruth because the sword of Elros and the King of Numenor has to perish with Ar-Pharazôn. So let's keep around Aranruth for that reason. So yeah, Tony, exactly. Something more like the traditional sword of the Crown Prince of Numenor would be. Yeah, exactly. So the king wields Aranruth and his heir. Because remember, the whole appointing of the heir to the throne in Numenor is a big deal, right? You sort of, there's like a sort of a coronation ceremony for the heir. And so at that point, that could be the moment when Narsil is given to them. Except, no, wait, that doesn't work either, because then it would still be in the household of Ar-Pharazôn, who doesn't have an heir, I guess. But it has to at some point then become the sword, get passed down in the from who was it, Silmarion, down into the down to the line of down to Elendil, obviously, so he can end up with it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so Tony, we just have to figure out a story for why the Sword of the Crown Prince instead passes through Silmarion to the Lords of Andunier. But we can handle that when we get there, if we need to. But anyway, we're getting way ahead of ourselves. The point is still, where does it come from? Okay, but I didn't get to talk about my Baron objection. Here's my Baron objection. When's he going to use it, Baron? Is he ever going to draw it? I mean, he threatens to... I mean, think about it. After Finrod's death, there are very few times that Baron is in armed combat after that. Right? He fights with Celegorm, but that's mostly tussling, right? He goes, but he's disguised as a wolf when he goes into Angband. He then gets his hand bitten off. He would fight with it against the dwarves, right? Could he kill the wolf with it? Could he kill Carcharoth with it? Well, Huon has to kill Carcharoth, but he could wound Carcharoth with it. So yeah, Mariel, against the dwarves of Nogrod is really the primary place. Yeah, that's kind of it. Yeah, Mariel, that's kind of... I mean, we could work that, right? The only time Telkar's sword is used by Baron is against the dwarves of Nogrod, right? I mean, there's some irony there that could be really fun, right? The Lord of Nogrod could recognize it, right? So that's kind of fun, actually. Okay, all right. You've convinced me. That alone is awesome enough reason to, and it makes sense that that's the only way that the gift of the dwarves to Finrod is the only way that I can see a Noldo getting it, because otherwise the Noldo are going to make their own stuff. Yeah. Yep. So yes. Dwarves to Finrod to Baron to Dior. No. Shoot. Because Dior has to get Arenruth. He has to get Thingol's sword. Oh man, we've run into Arenruth again. Dior's second best sword, says Lincoln. Okay, well, so now, Marie, I'm fine. Marie wants it to be Elros's wife's sword. I'm totally fine with that, but I'm not worried about Elros. I'm worried about getting it to Elros. Once we get it to Elros, we'll be fine. It's just getting it to Elros that we need to do. Dior as Thingol's heir is going to be using Thingol. So we already have Arenruth itself, Thingol's sword, has to get to the Bay of Balar so that Elros can use it. Right, Dior can still have Narsil and it can be taken to the coast by Elwing. Yeah, but see, I don't want... I mean, it's become a running joke already, Lincoln, that it's like the second best sword. But come on, that's a lame story for Narsil. Like, to have Narsil be like the always a bridesmaid, never a bride sword of the first age. I mean, you know, come on, that's kind of sad. Elwing is going to have to bring Aran Ruth. So we're going to have her carry 2 swords. So she comes to Balar burdened by 2 swords and the Silmaril, right? So wait a second. Mike wants to know if we can somehow get Narsil into Elendil's hands. Yes, the question is, how do we get it out of Elendil's hands? Earendil's hands. How do we get it out of Earendil's hands if once it gets there? He would have a sword. We know he has a sword. It's in the description. I kind of like the idea that Narsil is the sword that Earendil uses in his fight with Encalagon the Black. I mean, that'd be pretty cool. If the sword of Elendil turned out to be the sword that killed Encalagon, you know, the greatest dragon ever, like, that'd be fun. But oh, Mario, you've got it. You've got it. Mario has solved it. I'm totally sold. Okay. And this, Brianna, this can make you happy too. Maedhros. The sword goes from Baron to Dior, right? So Dior does have the 2 swords. It's lost, though. It is lost in the ruin of Doriath when the Feanorians attack, and Maedhros gets it. And then Maedhros gives it to Elros. I like that. Yes. So in the sack of Doriath, one of the Feanorians gets it. But he doesn't get Aran Ruth. And that would explain why Elros has 2 swords, right? Because Aran Ruth would come down to him, as it were, like, lawfully, right? That is, Elwing can bring Aran Ruth, her father's sword, along with the Silmaril, right? She can carry both of those with her out of Doriath. So that sword comes eventually to Elros through his mom, but then Maedhros gives him Narsil. Yeah. No, Mike, I was just thinking the same thing. Why do we have 2 twin brothers, one of whom has 2 swords and the other of whom has no sword at all? What about poor Elrond, right? Poor Elrond is being passed over and gets nothing for Christmas, right? I mean, yeah. Okay, no, I've got it. Okay. So, yeah. All right. Elrond gets Aran Ruth, and Elros is given Narsil by Maedhros, right? And it's we can use that as a gift of atonement thing, as a gesture which shows Maedhros's remorse, right, and his befriending of the twins and stuff. So that works really well. So Elrond has Aran Ruth, and Elros has Narsil, right, at the end of the first stage there. Then when they split up, right, when Elrond stays and Elros goes to become the first king of Númenor, Elrond gives his brother Elros Aranruth, saying, "This is the sword of the king." And so it should be yours. And so that's why Narsil, which was given to him, which was the sword of Beren, but was given to him by Maedhros, becomes his second best sword. Like, he keeps it as an heirloom of his house because in memory of Maedhros, and in honor of Beren, of course. But he takes Aranruth as his sword, and that becomes the sword of the king because it is in that context, in that separation, when Elrond gives it to him. Phew. Oh, good. Mario, you just suggested that too, right? Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Boy, that was harder than I expected it to be. Goodness. That was complicated. Yeah. But I think that works. It's the Brotherhood of the Traveling Sword. Yeah, essentially. Mario, right, exactly, Mario. Exactly as you suggest, Elrond has this sort of foresight, right? He has this at the moment of their separation, he's never going to be a king, right? He's never going to be a ruler. He's like, that is not going to be my role, right? And so, I am never going to wield the sword of the king. So he gives that to his brother. And yes, David, Elros should give Elrond something else back. But we can think about that later. I'm not going to worry. Let's not borrow too much trouble. It's relevant now because of Telkar the Smith. So, okay. Whew. All right. Yeah. So think of the significance, right? Elendil comes back to Middle-earth with Narsil, right? So think of that moment, right, in the Last Alliance when Gil-galad and Elrond meet with Elendil, and he's still wielding Narsil, the sword that his brother's old sword that he remembers Maedhros giving to him and everything. Oh man, like that, that would be really, that'd really bring back the memories for Elrond, wouldn't it? Okay. Anyway, whew. I'm glad we solved that though. That was bothering me. Okay, so Gamil Zirak. Now, Gamil Zirak was supposed to be Telkar's master. I want to use Gamil Zirak in a different way. We need a famous dwarf craftsman to be the red shirt dwarf craftsman whom Thingol hires to put the Silmarillion, to reforge the Nauglamir, and I'm gonna nominate Gamil Zirak for that. Gamil just means the old. And so again, the idea is Gamil Zirak is the sort of the teacher of Telkar. But I think I wanna flip that too. Because I would want Gamil Zirak to be the by the time we get to the ruin of Doriath, it's been a while, right? But Gamil Zirak is going to be like one of the last of the ancient craftsmen, right? That can be super old by this time, and therefore more of an outrage when Thingol mistreats him. When they get into their fight. I'm imagining Gamil Zirak, the aged, venerable, and enormously respected dwarf. So this is why the dwarves of Nogrod go to war over this, right? Because Gamil Zirak, whom they would basically view as the greatest jewel smith of all time, right? Gamil Zirak is would be like the Feanor of the dwarves, right? The Feanor of the Firebeards. And he ends up being killed by elves in Doriath. He would not be responsible for the death of Thingol. I would think that his young and rash assistants would probably do the actual killing of Thingol. I wouldn't have him actually wield the blade. I would have him be this sort of tragic figure trying to reconcile things and getting caught in the middle of it and ending up dead tragically. And then having the War of Vengeance fought over him. So that's my thought for Gamil Zirak. So I want to hang on to him. We won't get to Gamil Zirak obviously right away, but again, we're talking about dwarf culture in general, right? So I wanted to make sure to mention there are only a few named dwarves, so I thought we'd throw them in so that we can be prepared there. So Telkar would come first. Do we want to make Telkar still of Nogrod? Make Telkar a Firebeard? I mean, he was, but we don't have to keep him or her a Firebeard. We can make him a Broadbeam if the Broadbeams are primarily the weapon folks. Again, we could make him an exceptional Firebeard, but I don't think we have to. If we did that separately, then we would have basically two primary craftsman figures, right? Telkar, the greatest weaponsmith of all time, and Gamil Zirak, the greatest jewelsmith of all time among the dwarves. So that would be, one of Belagos, one of Nogrod. That would kind of balance better. Yeah. Brandon says it's hilarious whenever I suggest making a character a tragic figure because every single character in the Silmarillion is already one. Well, that's the point, Brianna. It's not that I'm wanting to transform them into a tragic figure. It's that I want to make sure that we do justice to the individual tragedies of each character. That's really that's really my point. Yeah. Anyway, so and I'm not committed to that. I don't especially care which group Telkar is from. Do we want to have Telkar be around at this time? Have Telkar be the one? Because, I mean, the advantage of having Telkar be around now is that we can have Eol studying with Telkar. So that, we have the greatest weaponsmith. It enables us to rather than the sort of, non-personal Eol studied with the dwarves, right? Like he just went vaguely among the dwarves and kind of learned vaguely stuff. Instead, we can have a particular relationship between Telkar and Eol. And, you know what I'm thinking there, actually, we could have a really interesting scene where Telkar is disapproving of Anglachel. That is it would be the first foreshadowing of ill to come from Anglachel. Eol, Telkar could come in and see Anglachel and be like, dude, that thing ain't right. It just ain't right. Or to caution Eol about it or something. Yeah. So Mike said we don't have to waste screen time on dwarves we're not invested in. Exactly. I want to resist just having and now dwarf extras, right? If we're going to establish relationships and have them playing particular roles, I want to introduce particular dwarf characters, but I don't want to multiply the cast of characters unnecessarily. This is one of the reasons why I wish we could make the dwarves a little longer lived, right? Because it would be, from a dramatic standpoint, it would be awesome if Azachal, Lord of Belagost, is the one with whom we're making the alliance at the beginning. If Azachal is the Lord who is primarily the one with whom we're establishing this relationship, so that when remember, Azachal's fate is to be killed by Glaurung at the Battle of Sudden Flame, but he's gonna die wounding Glaurung, and Glaurung is gonna go slinking injured back to Angband after that. So Azachal will die heroically in the battle, and it would be nice to kind of set that up, right? Earlier on, if it gives him more of a sort of a heroic arc. See, Mike, that's what I was thinking. You've got Narsil and Anglachel right next to each other. Telkar has just made Narsil, and Eol has just made Anglachel, and we have the Telkar could be looking at the two of them and talking about the difference of their two fates. Yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing that I'm thinking of there. Anyway, right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I am I. It's the Battle of Unnumbered Tears that Azakal dies. Am I misremembering, Marie? Oh, what could be likelier than that? That is me misremembering that. It's Unnumbered Tears? I thought that was Sudden Flame. Isn't that what drew... No. Because... Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I know Glaurung is there in both. But, yeah, no, as I think about it, I think you're right. Darn it. I say darn it because if that's the case, then we really can't, obviously we can't stretch them out that long. I mean, because of course, we always do have the option of trimming down the 400 years a little bit, right? I mean, I know this, the Siege of Angband lasts for 400 years. We could nip a little bit off of that time. Yeah. No. Yes, you're right. Yeah, no, it is Unnumbered Tears. Shoot, I had forgotten that. Yeah, see, yeah. So Tony, that's what Tony is thinking of the same thing that I was vaguely gesturing towards earlier on. Let's look for a second. So I'm getting out my Return of the King here. Look at the line of Durin, right? Durin the Deathless lived quite a while. Of course, we don't get Durin the Deathless's age at death, but. And yeah, they do recycle names, Lincoln. That doesn't help me all that much. I mean, it's a little bit of a help, but it's a disappointment still. I mean, yeah, like the Azakal in Unnumbered Tears could be the son or the grandson of this Azakal, and they can have the same name because, yeah, I mean, dwarves do that and everything, but it's not the same, right? Oh well. All right, I'll just have to give it up. Ooh, I don't think I want to go in the reincarnation direction, Marielle. That's a can I don't want to open. I just want to back slowly away from that question, I think. Yeah. Oh, right. I'm sorry, Marielle, but you're thinking about the Durin thing. Yeah. Okay. No, you're right. Okay, so just as Durin comes back and his descendants, so Azakal, who is like the Durin of the Broadbeams, would come back. Is it too much to ask to make dwarves in the First Age really long-lived, right, and have their lifespans diminish over the, as the time goes by, so that like by the time we get to the end of the Third Age, they're now only living 250 years, whereas they used to routinely live like 1,000 years? Is that too much to ask? Fine. Okay, fine. That's fine. It's fine. How would we explain the diminishing lifespans, Zach? Well, they're fading, like the elves. The dominion of men is coming, right? So that would affect the dwarves as well. And Tony's right. See, Tony's on my side. That's good. It would parallel what happens with the Numenorians later. But see, that if we did the parallel with the Numenorians, then we have to show how because the decline in the age of the Numenorians correlates directly with their like moral corruption. So I don't really want to go there. So Hakan, yes, the dwarf fathers would be especially old. So like Durin the First could have lived a really long time. Like that's not hard. Come on, you can give me that, right? You can totally give me that much. That the seven fathers of the dwarves, so the dwarves actually shaped by the hand of Aule, live longer than their descendants, right? So they can live as long as we need them to live. They can live like a couple thousand years if we need to. But then the other dwarves, like their descendants, then live a lesser time. Right? Come on, you can spot me that. So here's the payoff, right? Here's the payoff from that. Then Azakal, the dwarf who dies in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, is so we have the climactic death of he's the Durin of Belagast, right? So it's a big deal. So we have, think about the gravity of that funeral procession. This is not just like, hey, this dude happens to be our king. This is our Durin, right? This is the father of our line. Who gave his life to help protect, and is a big deal, right? So that would be really cool. So yeah, let's have Azakal be one of the seven fathers. Why not? And the Lord of Nogrod, right? The one whom Beren kills at Sarnathrad is also one of the other seven, right? So so we've got Durin, and we've got Azakal, and the rather disappointingly named Naugladur. He's never named. So in the published Silmarillion, the Lord of Nogrod, who is killed by Beren, is just called the Lord of Nogrod all the way through. He's not given a proper name. And the name Naugladur, which I have put up here, is only mentioned. He's called Naugladur in the Book of Lost Tales. So Book of Lost Tales, Volume 2, the story of the Nauglamir, we get that. But yeah, Tony, exactly. It is an Elvish name. And what's more, it's a really disappointing one because it just means the King of the Dwarves, right? It basically translates to King of the Dwarves, something like that. So, we don't have to stick with that name. I'm totally fine with giving him a better name. But yeah. So yeah. So can we compromise there? It's fine. So Marie, it's fine. We can make this. We can make the craftsman short-lived. So Telkar doesn't have to live that long, right? Gamil Zirak doesn't have to live that long. He can be very venerable, right? So Gamil Zirak can be like 350 or 400, which means we'd have to introduce him. Well, he'd be the original maker of the Nauglamir. Easy. Okay, right. So we introduce Gamil Zirak. He is like he's like the young prodigy, right? When they give this young prodigy, who's not going to be called Gamil, he's going to be called Zirak, right? So Zirak, this hot young prodigy from Nogrod, they bring him some imported mithril. He gets that together with Finrod's gems, and he makes the Nauglamir, right? In his early life, and then later on. So now it's been hundreds of years, right? And he is now Gamil Zirak the Old, the ancient venerable. He's like 400 plus or something, and he is brought in to remake the Nauglamir, which he originally made. See, that works, right? That's okay. But so he's old because his name means old, but he's not super ridiculously old. As Mariel was just pointing out, Dwalin lives to 340, right? So come on, you can spot me a 400-year-old dwarf. It's all good. So let's make the Lords of Belagast and Nogrod two of the seven fathers. Why not? Now Lincoln is wanting us to do like this, if we're going to cover two of the seven fathers of the dwarves, that like, how are we not going to do something with Durin's story? I hear you, Lincoln. I mean, it's hard because he's so out of it, right? I mean, geographically, so out of it. I don't know how we get there. But anyway, we could do it in flashback, Marie. Yeah, from the Second Age when we get over there geographically. Are we ever going to go back to Eriador? Is our narrative ever going to go back to Eriador? I can think of very few occasions. I mean, when men come in, maybe. Maybe a Sauron subplot, Lincoln. We are going to need to stash a Balrog in Moria, right? That's going to need to happen at the end of the first stage. Marie's pointing out we do need a Tom Bombadil cameo. That's true. But even having him interact with Durin would be a challenge. Yeah. No, Zach, well, I'll have to see. We don't necessarily have to show the Balrog going there. But I'm just thinking of like, I thought of that just in casting my mind to the question of like, what kind of connections does Durin have to first age stories at all? Right. And the only thing I can think of is the Balrog. Of course, they're going to discover the Balrog there, but the Balrog has to get there and all the Balrogs are elsewhere. So right now in the first age, Durin is already at Khazad-dûm and the Balrogs are all, still above ground. Right. So it has to be after Durin is there that the Balrog, burrows his way to the, hiding himself under Khazad-dûm. But Tony Mead suggests that some of the petty dwarves could come from the Longbeards, and that could give us an excuse to at least talk about Durin. Yeah. You're right that Tom Bombadil has a dwarvish name. Well, Marie, there's no problem in having him encounter dwarves, right? Because the dwarves travel. I mean, he doesn't travel. Tom Bombadil doesn't travel, but the dwarves do, right? I mean, they're all over the place. Their road goes right past. It's the dwarf road that, he takes, Frodo and the hobbits to in the Fellowship of the Ring. So, yeah. Oh, Tony suggests maybe Mime was originally one of the people of Durin. Ooh. So that Mime is in exile who's already crossed the mountain into a strange new land. So that's why like nobody wants Mime. Yeah. Yeah. Lincoln, I think we do want the Balrog. It might be a surprise, but it's gonna, again, remember all of this stuff. It's gonna be one of the great payoffs, right? When we get to the Lord of the Rings story, think of the impact of these things. So when Legolas says it's a Balrog, it was a Balrog of Morgoth, right? In the Lord of the Rings, for people who've never read anything but the Lord of the Rings, that sentence is almost meaningless, right? To explain what a Balrog is by calling it a Balrog of Morgoth is to just bring up a name which means even less than Balrog does. No one who's heard of Morgoth? Who's he, right? Again, I mean, if you haven't read the Silmarillion, how are you going to know what Balrog of Morgoth even means? But of course, to SilmFilm viewers, it's gonna mean something indeed, right? So, we're not going to be able to pass up giving it that kind of weight. All right, we'll worry about Mime more later on. Okay. All right. So do we compromise? So Azahal and the dude in Nogrod who needs a dwarvish name, they can be the fathers, and so therefore long-lived. So I can get my dramatic arc of Azahal meeting Thingol and then dying at the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, right? Okay, that is awesome. I'm excited. Okay. Oh, Hakon, you think we should get to the plot of the episode? Oh, okay. All right. Fine. Okay. So the first meeting. Suggestions from the discussion boards, as always. Nobody dies, but the elves are wondering, who are these ugly, short people? Are they evil? Yes. Yeah, exactly. Their ugliness, they should be really uncertain, right? They should be really concerned about them, especially since, remember, they've just met orcs, right? So they just met these strange and unlovely people who turned out to be savage and awful, right? And and Beleg like barely escapes with his life. So when they meet the dwarves, do we want to go as far as having them attack the elves, right? Like if Mablung should at least threaten them, right? I mean, he's got to at least be wondering if these are because he's never seen orcs. He's heard about them. There aren't enough orcs around for him to have met any yet, I wouldn't think. So Beleg has met them and he told them about them, but he hasn't seen them for himself. So he sees these dwarves. He's got to be thinking like, hey, maybe these are those Irch that Beleg told me about. So he would threaten them, but they would talk, and then he would discover that they spoke Sindarin, and that's what would make him drop his weapon, lower his weapon, right? His spear. Mablung should have a spear. Can Mablung have a spear? I want Mablung to have a spear. I mean, that seems like the kind of thing that he would have, right? Yeah. Oh, you want him to have an axe? He can have an axe too, but I want him to have a spear. We're not going to get any cool spears until Gilgalad, but Tuor is going to have an awesome axe. Okay, all right, both. All right, we can compromise on that, Hakan. That's fine. Yeah. Okay. Tony, do the dwarves have accents? Yeah, I'm thinking Scottish accents. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Yeah, no. Let's not have the dwarves have Scottish accents. That's kind of pretty much the main thing that I would ask. I don't think we have to give them an accent. I mean, not like a recognizable terrestrial accent, modern accent. Remember that their language is a Semitic language. It's based on, it's modeled after Semitic languages. So if they had any accent, it would be like a Middle Eastern kind of accent. But yeah, something like that. Anyway, okay, so what do you think? Should they meet the dwarves peaceably? I'm interested in the idea of the dwarves already being engaged in a fight against the orcs. I would think that if Mablung and by the way, I love the idea of Mablung being out scouting. That seems like a Mablung kind of thing. And for him to be, Beleg to be the first encounter the orcs and Mablung encountering the dwarves, I like it. So if Mablung just meets up with a party of dwarves, I'm thinking he mistakes them from orcs and barely avoids tragic consequences, but I'm thinking he's not going to be very trusting. So we could do that. We could do the, I don't really trust you. Maybe you're really orcs and I don't really know. Why do you speak Sindarin anyway? I'm uncertain about this. And then they are like, well, who is this dude who's threatening us? And we're offended by that or whatever. We could do that. If the dwarves are actually fighting orcs, then he would see them. It would set up the ally thing a little more directly, right? So he would come in. Maybe Mablung could come in and help them defeat the orcs, right? Because seeing the two of them together, I think that Mablung would have no doubt as to which are the orcs and which are not orcs, right? So he would come and he would help the strange-looking, short bearded guys against the orcs, whom at least Beleg has described to him, so he would be able to tell which is which. So that has them fighting on the same side. It has, suggests the hey, look, allies in battle. And also it'd be like, dude, armor. Look at these guys' armor and weapons. This looks frankly handy. So there's definitely something to be said for introducing the dwarves as a military presence, like a fighting ally from the beginning there. Yeah. And I agree, Hakan, we should have Eöl be the first to encounter the dwarves, but I like the idea of setting that up first and having having, showing showing Eol like learning lessons, but not show that it's the dwarves who do that yet. Yeah, Zachary, that's a really interesting idea. So here's the other suggestion: is to have Mablung meeting the dwarves and have there be some tension and, like the brandishing of weapons, but no combat. And then orcs come in so that they end up fighting together against the orcs. That would certainly, the shape of that kind of encounter, Zachary, would certainly emphasize the whole, we are allies of convenience fighting against a common enemy situation. So that would, is that too direct a way of suggesting that? Maybe it is, but I mean, it certainly conveys the message clearly. Yeah, I don't have a strong feeling about this. I'll leave this to the outliners to decide how you want to handle that. But the idea of Mablung being sent out. Now, what about Melian? Does Melian have any, a couple of you were asking about this. Does Melian have any, oh yeah, Lincoln, I like the fact that Lincoln is pointing out how this foreshadows the Battle of Five Armies, right? Elves and dwarves about to come to blows until the catastrophic arrival of a goblin army to unite them against it. If we actually do a little mini parallel sort of distant foreshadowing, that'd be actually kind of fun. You're right. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Okay. Melian. A couple of people were asking about Melian. Does Melian have some kind of... so she would be the one who suggests sending out Mablung? How much knowledge of the dwarves would she have through Ale and Yavanna? How much would she reveal about it? Because, see, I'm thinking Melian doesn't always say everything that she thinks, I mean, I'm thinking that she doesn't... Her role as queen there, in Doriath is not to be like, okay, let me give you all the inside skinny of what went on and what everybody talked about back in Valinor. I don't think that that's the way that she would be, right? Yeah, exactly, Tony. I think that she would help people discover things for themselves rather than just telling everybody. That makes more sense to me. It seems to fit better. Okay. She could have at least a kind of premonition, right? I would think that where her prior knowledge would come in is not, hey, so I know about the dwarves. They're around here. Go find them, right? It wouldn't be like that. She would be able to tell them. So like when Mablung came back and was like, I met these things. I don't even know what they are. She would be like, these must be, the dwarves. So she could know about them and help to explain them after the fact, right? Even though she would say like, but I warn you, they are strange and their hearts are not as the hearts of our people or whatever, something of that kind. Yeah. But maybe she has some kind of premonition that like, so Beleg has just come back saying there are these orc things, right? And this looks bad. And Melian could say to Thingol, my heart forebodes that a time of evil is coming to Doriath and that, these orcs are but the first of, many that will, it's going to get bad. And Thingol could then say, then we will need help in battle. But how does he know that there is any help? Of course he knows that there's help. Because there's the other elves. There's the rest of his people. Remember, he's Elwë. He's the original king of all the Teleri, right? And he was with them when Lenwë left behind. What if he is sending Mablung on a journey to go cross the mountains and find the Nandor to seek their help, right? Yeah. So that's Thingol's decision. So Thingol's like, go seek Lenwë and the Nandor and get their aid. And then he meets the dwarves along the way. So his mission to Lenwë is kind of aborted, right? Because he meets the dwarves first, and then he's like, whoa, okay, this is a big deal. I need to go back to Thingol right away, and we can talk about that. So they get a little distracted. And then the Green Elves show up anyway, right? So the Green Elves sort of show up Eucatastrophe without being asked for. But you've got to think that's going to be Thingol's impulse, right? He's already in communication with Círdan. So he knows there are two other groups of Teleri around, right? There's Círdan at the Havens with whom he's in communication, and there's Lenwë and the Nandor who are way further out. So yeah, so okay, so he would send Mablung after. That works. That works for me. If you guys like that, that works for me. And then Melian can say something cryptic about, to Mablung, like, you're, something along the lines of like, your journey will not, you will not achieve your quest, but you will do, like something cryptic about like how things aren't going to turn out the way that he expects, how his journey is going to be successful, but not in the way he expects it to be, or something, some nice, sort of gnomic Melian like statement, along those lines. And yes, Marie, by doing that, we do set up the fact like, hey, don't forget, there are other elves over there, so that when they show up soon, they're not gonna be coming out of nowhere, and we will be reminded of their existence. Yes. Oh, and Marie, the dwarves would absolutely know of the Nandor. They absolutely would. Because they're traveling all over Eriador, so they can get, that would be one of the things that Thingol would ask, right? He'd be like, hey, how's Lenwë, right? Have you seen my kin over there? And the dwarves would respond. Yeah. Okay. All right, stuff on the petty dwarves. Let's save this for next time, though, because we're out of time. So let me just go straight to questions for next time. So, what actually happens in the next episode? So the subject of the next episode is the building of Menegroth. So we've established the alliance with the dwarves, right? We didn't really quite get as far in our plotting here, did we? But we're pretty close. I think we've pretty much gotten there. But anyway, so we have the establishment of Menegroth, which means we need to introduce the petty dwarves, and we need to kick Meme or similar out of Menegroth, so that'll be fine. But what else happens? I mean, I was looking back at our outline of episodes, and there's not that much. There's like, Menegroth is built and Bulldog is sent south. That's pretty much all we have for this episode. So what does that, I mean, I think we need a little more action. We need, like, what exactly is the story content of this episode? We need events to occur. So I just wanted to kind of prompt some more kind of brainstorming about action in this episode. We need to make sure that we touch base with Círdan. I don't think we're going to have time for Círdan in this in episode 4 that we were just talking about, but we definitely need to get to him in episode 5. And that seems a perfect time to do it because we've got the Pearl thing. Remember, we'll talk about the Pearls next week. But we do need to make sure that we are bringing Círdan the Shipwright prominent and his people prominently in, so that when they come under attack, and Círdan is going to, remember, we're going to have a whole subplot thread of Círdan sailing up the coast and finding the burned ships and all that stuff. So we need to make sure that we touch base with Círdan, and this next episode seems to be a logical place to do it in. Bulldog going south. So what happens? First of all, like, how does Bulldog distinguish himself? I was like, so what does it mean? You send Bulldog south. So, do we get a battle? Are we going to actually get combat? Are we going to get, hordes of orcs coming down and the first skirmishes, with the elves and the dwarves? Do we not do that yet? What is Bulldog up to? How do we show him acting? What does it mean for again, Bulldog sent south is what we have in our outline. So what does that actually translate to? And And then my question, do we want to check in on the Noldor? I'm not necessarily saying that we need to do that, but again, certainly if we're wanting a way to get a little more story substance into this episode, that would be a way to do it. It might be too soon to check in on the Noldor. We might still want to leave the Noldor just traveling north. But I just wanted to kind of throw that out there as a question. Are you guys interested in doing that? Briefly, just to kind of check in and show, here's the people of Fingolfin trudging along the shore and kind of being miserable, though nothing like as miserable as they'll be later. Or whatever. Okay, so those are my questions for next time. And don't forget, next time is next week, 1 week from today, November 10th. November 10th is when that's going to be. So I look forward to talking to you guys next week. And then we'll have our little break for travels, my travels, and Trish's travels, and Thanksgiving. Okay, cool. Very good. And yes, Hakan, I will look into that. Thank you. All right. So thanks everybody for joining me, and I look